So here is the thing about the wind. It does not understand this thing you call relationship. You know this is true. You say, the wind has stopped blowing, but you don't for a moment think the wind has decided to settle down, have a nice, stable family, do the 9 to 5. You say the wind has stopped blowing because it is comforting to think of endings, of rest. But the wind doesn't stop. The wind doesn't settle. The wind only ever moves out, moves on, moves away. There is no relationship in wind. There is only wind. Wind and things in the way of the wind. Until Charlemagne. The second time Charlemagne caught the wind, he was ready for her. He was watching for her as he hopped the gulch, looking for the dress he could set flapping at her legs, looking for the hair he could whip into a lioness's mane. And she was there, smaller than he remembered, with brighter eyes. She noticed him coming. She spread her arms open wide to welcome him. He felt something leave him, something like part of himself, like breath, like he couldn't pull enough of himself together to gust, and yet he was rushing, reeling, headlong and reckless, all because she was standing there, as she promised. He tore up the hill. He would have beat the world down to get to her, to feel her stillness, to hear her heartbeat. He hurled himself into her arms, into her lungs. He felt the snap, 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 snap. 3 bones, ribs, her ribs, broken as he rushed inside her, expanded her too quickly, and just as quickly she was retching him back out. She was on the ground. She couldn't get enough air. She was rocking and moaning. He knew what those broken ribs meant. It meant trees tumbling. It meant windows cracking. It meant old houses crumbling to dust. It meant everything he'd ever broken and left behind to rot. It meant her not being her anymore. The wind moved on. Or tried to. Why wasn't it easy to move on? She was trying to talk. It's okay, it's okay, it's okay, please don't go. Now is when he could exit. Now is when he could move on. Now is when he could decide to remain free, as a wind should always be. But he stalled. He eddied. He flitted around her, nudging her face and cheeks. Would she be okay? He would have to be more gentle next time. Next time. He wanted there to be a next time. He picked her up, swept her home, set her on her porch, for gawking and badgering, and however did the child break 3 ribs. She told the truth. I tried to hold the wind, but he was too strong. He didn't mean it. Of course, they assumed she was lying. They pushed her into the house. Please come back, she whispered over her shoulder. I'll be waiting. The wind peeked in the window every day as she lay still on her bed. Sometimes he swept leaves into the air for her to watch them fall. Sometimes little flurries of dirt. Once he swept wet petals onto her window in a mosaic, and they stuck there until noon, filtering her light in pinks and yellows. They taught her to crochet so that she could be useful and still. Scarves, they said, and hats in terrible colors. They didn't know she could already sew, was already working on a secret masterpiece of handwork. Tiny, curving stitches, boning. She showed the wind. It was a corset, see, the boning, whaleboning. It was stronger than she was. It would wrap her up like armor, hold her together. She was making it for him. Well, for her to wear for him. Ordinarily, Charlemagne hated confinement, but 3 busted ribs had taught her the value of grandmother's sturdy whaleboning. This will hold me together, she said, next time we are together. She wanted there to be a next time, too. She worked feverishly any time they weren't checking on her, worrying her for hats and scarves. He visited impatiently. even stealing glances at her in bed at midnight. Stitches by day, dreams and fevered dreams by night. She may have called it armor, but she was adding lace. Little bits of lace and ribbon to tease and tassel in the breeze. Little baubles he could flutter and ruffle on his way to the her he wanted. There was an ache in him. He wanted her well. The day Charlemagne was allowed out of bed, the wind tried very hard to be still. He peeked in at the window. She was shivery as she pulled out a fluttering dress, a white lace dress, and laid it next to her corset. Ribbons and laces and tiny stitches, she ran her fingers over them. Her hands were shaking. Her breathing was fast. She undid her buttons, slid her old dress off her shoulders, the fabric slipping down her back. He quickened at the window. Her back arched and stiffened. The fabric stopped slipping. "There you are," she said, and gave him a sly smile over her shoulder. "You can never be completely silent, you know." She crawled over to the window, holding her dress closed with one hand. "I will always hear you. Always. Now, no peeking. You have to wait." She pulled the curtains shut in front of him. He paced like a lion. The air was thick and hard to move. He hated air like that. It was suffocating him. How many buttons did she have to undo and redo? How many laces did she have to thread and tighten? Would she never be done? The screen door creaked and slapped shut. He laughed. He danced to the porch, only to find it empty. She was sprinting up the hill. Their hill. Her white dress flew behind her like snow trailing in the wind. It was a game she wanted then. He was terribly good at games. Teasing games. Let her run. He would catch her when the time was right. She was waiting by the blossoming trees, her fingers playing wantonly in the flowers. Her skirts were petals, waiting to be ruffled, to be plucked. He could feel the air from her breathing. It was quick. It was eager. He slipped up on cat's paws. She hadn't heard him. Good. He whirled around her, and she caught her breath in her chest. She smiled. She laughed. And then she bit her lip. She blushed. He whipped harder, around and around and around. He would spend his strength around her, shaking the trees, shaking the earth, moving the clouds in the sky. He could do all this. He could do all this for her. Everything moved for her. And then he picked her up, gently as only a wind can, and he filled her. He felt the stillness in her lungs, heard the thrumming of her ecstatic heart. Yes, 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 my Charlemagne, all this for you. He was contained. He was still. He was at rest beneath her heart, beneath the bones of her body, beneath the bones of a whale. He was cradled. She sighed. He lowered her to the ground. Of course, you know there are consequences for such things. Little girls cannot ride bareback on the wind without consequence. At first there was nothing noticeable. A rosy glow to her thin cheeks, a tiredness. Then came dizziness, fainting. Her parents insisted it was her corset. She couldn't breathe, they said. Then her mother unlaced it. Charlemagne's belly was small and round. She was 14. There was much shouting, much shaking of her shoulders. Charlemagne told the truth. "I rode the back of the wind." She thought if she showed them, they would see, they would understand how amazing this was. Their daughter, their little Charlie, the wind, had chosen her. Wind stirred the room. "Look, look," she said. "He is so gentle how he picks me up. I don't even hit my head on the ceiling." Her parents saw. Her parents understood. This did not help her case. Her father suggested a shotgun wedding. Her mother said, "Are you out of your feckin' mind? It's the wind." Her father tackled her from the sky. Her mother kicked the shins of the wind, or tried to. Her brother flipped the bird at a corner recently vacated by the wind. They put Charlemagne in the shed. No windows, a locked door. Let's see the wind try and get her out of that. The wind howled. He was used to leaving things behind, used to taking things away. Never once had something been taken from him. Never once had he cared enough for anything to know if it had been taken from him. He beat the doors of the house open. He shattered the windows. He summoned clouds to thunder and clap and frighten her family until they sat under the table and cried. "Stop it!" Charlemagne cried. "Stop it!" The wind turned its head. "Those are my people," she said. "You can't do this." The wind fingered her father's mustache, her mother's hair. It would be so easy to break them, to take her back. "Please." The wind drooped. The wind moved on. There were months yet to wait. In a dark room, alone, her dad guarding the door. It was crazy-making. They wouldn't even give her crochet to help her pass the time. No window to mark the day's length. The walls closed in around her. She could not hear the wind. She could only hear her father's unending ramblings. "There must have been a man. It's only natural for a girl her age. No more of this nonsense. Just tell Daddy who it was." Months. The wind could not see her, could not smell her. The wind worried a corner of the shed every night, so quietly it sounded like a mouse. When the child came, there was screaming. Charlemagne was flying apart, every muscle and tendon blown farther and farther away from each other as a great windy child wrestled inside. Her parents waited a day before calling the midwife. You will have heard that midwives are old and bony, fingers like magic and hearts hardened against tragedy. This midwife was plump and young. She scolded the parents for not having called her sooner. She poured oils and boiled water. She laid her fat hands on Charlemagne's belly to feel that the child was okay. She coaxed and waited and hummed. She called Charlemagne little lady and a princess, and when the child burst out, she went screaming from the house. She didn't even take her things. Charlemagne had collapsed into blackness from the strain. Her parents shook at the sight of the thing. It was not human. It was not wind. It was half here and there. Her father stuffed it into a grocery sack. He took it to the hill, chucked it into the gulch. But the wind was waiting with open arms below. He carried it away, trying to rustle up a lullaby as he went. They told her the child was born dead, that the wind stole the body. Charlemagne knew her parents well enough to see the lie in their faces. She pounded her father with her fists. "Where did you take it? Where did you leave it? Bring it back! Don't let it die!" He locked her back in the shed. "It's for you to recover," he said. But he eyed the wind on the hill with terror and held his gun closer. That night, the wind finally worried a chink free. He slipped into the shed, stroked at Charlemagne's hair. He wiped at Charlemagne's tears. She did not seem to recognize him. Her body was tight, her eyes flashing. He eddied around the room, nudge, nudge. Finally, she locked her eyes on him. "Take me away," she said. "Take me far, far away from these people." He blew the shed to splinters and boards. Oh, that felt good. He cradled Charlemagne, his Charlemagne, to his chest. Oh, that felt better. And they flew.